Hey history kids! Welcome to Kai and Timothy's Time Files. We suggest you take notes because information this good has to be on the test. Welcome to the 1920s, one of the most exciting times for Canadian culture. The transportation and communication technology from this time period was meant to make our vast nation a little bit smaller. The Canadian public hadn't felt this connected since the creation of the Canadian Pacific Railway. The inventions of the 1920s were also meant to bring joy after the innumerable personal losses from World War I and the Spanish influenza in Canada. Out of this desire for distraction and entertainment, the radio was born. The first radio, while influential, was very different from what we are familiar with today. The technology was incredibly expensive, and instead of using vacuum tubes to operate, they used a piece of crystal, usually quartz. The listener would move a thin piece of metal, otherwise known as a whisker, over the quartz to pick up a signal. These radios, known as cat whisker receivers, required earphones, because the sound the quartz produced was so quiet. There were many limitations in the radio's design, and the price was outrageous for the time period, but the radio would change and become more accessible to the Canadian public.
Soon, tubes would replace the radio's crystal design, and speakers would be added so that more than one person could listen at a time. Instead of running on cumbersome batteries, Edward S. Rogers would create a radio that could be plugged into an electrical socket at home. This radio would cost a whopping $150.
Let's review. The first radio was very expensive, used a whisker and quartz to receive a signal, and required the use of earphones. It also ran on large, ineffective batteries. But as we know, the radio begins to develop. Vacuum tubes replace the crystal and whisker design, speakers are added so that the whole family can listen in, and the radio can be plugged in at home. But what was the next step for the radio?
Guglielmo Marconi, the inventor of the first wireless radio, created the first commercial radio station, which was situated in Montreal. Soon, they began to pop up in many major cities. Do you remember Edward S. Rogers from the radio without the battery? He set up CFRB in Toronto. By 1929, Canada had 85 broadcasting stations in all, and the price of radios had decreased drastically. This created a sense of closeness in the country and allowed everyone to be exposed to cultural content, such as music, news, and dramatic entertainment. After the war, things were finally looking up for our country because, in 1931, radio gave us Hockey Night in Canada.
Are you ready for a quiz? Question 1. Which two items in the first radio were used for tuning?
Question 2. What replaced the whisker and quartz design of the first radio?
Question 3. Which Canadian created the first radio without a battery?
Question 4. Who created the first wireless radio and the first commercial broadcasting station in Canada?
Question 5. How did the invention of the radio help the grieving public of Canada? Great job! Get ready for the answers. Answer 1. A metal whisker and quartz. Answer 2. Vacuum tubes. Answer 3. Edward S. Rogers. Answer 4. Guglielmo Marconi. Answer 5. Allowed communication, gave a distraction from the personal losses of war and illness. I bet you got all those answers right. You've done some great work today and have learned so much about the radios of the 1920s. We really hope you enjoyed this time file. Well, this is Timothy and Kai signing off. See you soon for our next blast from the past.